If you say things that are true, if you stand for truth in this world, not everyone's going to like it. And that's something that, of course, you wrestle with. At the same time, when people are making threats and they're doing all that, we don't want that to work. I don't want to give these people what they want and then say, okay, well, you're threatening me, so I'm going to shut up. But that was the first time my kids realized that, oh, there are people who don't like dad in the world. Obviously, I don't want anything to happen to my family. That can't happen either. So that's the balance. And what balancing it has meant is really just going to whatever lengths are necessary to keep my family safe. So we've had to adjust our lives pretty significantly.
Welcome back, everyone. Today's guest on the podcast is Matt Walsh. Matt is an author, podcaster, political commentator, filmmaker, as well as a columnist and on-air personality for the conservative media outlet, The Daily Wire. So Melissa and I actually flew down to Nashville to share in this conversation with Matt, where we discussed a variety of topics, including the safeguarding of his family life, how he confronts and deals with the negativity and periodic outrage directed at him as a result of him being such a controversial online figure, and whether or not he even cares about people's opinions of him. We also talked about his feature films, including his most recent release, a hilarious documentary, which is currently in theaters called Am I Racist? Melissa and I want to really thank The Daily Wire for allowing us to record this episode in their studio space. We really enjoyed the time we spent with Matt. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. This is New World, Old Soul, and without any further ado, here's our conversation with Matt Walsh. Mr. Matt Walsh, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. How are you?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we have been longtime followers of you, going back to your days of having a blog through your Blaze days here, obviously with The Daily Wire. So it's been really fascinating to watch your career ascension and progression over time.
Yes, you guys are back. You're back in the old school days.
We are.
Back with the blog. He actually introduced your blog to me probably in 2012 when we decided to do the whole homestead thing, and we were just diving more into. Well, we started caring more about politics, I suppose, when we started having kids.
Yeah,
and so we were just reading about it. Like, I was like, this guy is on it. And then when you signed with the Blaze, we were like, look at him go! Like, this is so crazy. And so it's been really fun to watch it.
Crazy to think it's been that long, you know?
Yeah.
Quite the journey. Is this where you envisioned yourself at this stage of life?
It's hard to say because things, I started in radio, even before the blog days. I started in local music radio when I was 20 or 21. And so it's been kind of you have a plan for how you want your life to go, and but it's never going to go exactly as you plan because that's the way that it always works. So it's hard to say that I envision being exactly here, but I will say there are certain aspects of what I'm doing now that had always been a dream of mine. One of the big ones is making movies. That had always been, even when I was in middle school, it's probably one of the first real ambitions that I had, in terms of a career. So it's been pretty surreal to fulfill that at this stage of life.
Well, you're very good at making movies. We enjoyed What is a Woman. It's actually, What is a Woman is what eventually got us to finally sign up for Daily Wire because we wanted to see it so badly. And I've been here, like my dad's like, sign up for Daily Wire. It's so great. I'm like, well, I can see this stuff on YouTube, but I didn't realize how much stuff was on there that was not available anywhere else. But we really wanted to watch What is a Woman, and we wanted to include it as part of our homeschool curriculum. We have 4 kids, and we have kids that are in high school now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
yeah, I love to hear that.
It was amazing. And our 14-year-old is actually probably one of your biggest fans. He's maybe the driest child you've ever met, but super funny. And he's like, my favorite's Matt Walsh. And he says it in like the most dry way. But he watches your daily podcast and everything. So you've got teenagers that are out there caring and paying attention, and to inspire young boys is so important in today's society.
Yeah, it's always great to hear that because sometimes it's hard to know. It can feel like our whole audience is a bunch of old people like me, but mostly because if high schoolers or middle schoolers are listening or following, I wouldn't really have any way to know that. I don't
just called us all old.
Yeah, I was going to say we're 3 years older than you are. What does that make us?
Well, look, it is what it is.
Yeah,
over the hill, all of us.
Yeah,
but it is good to know that because sometimes it can feel like it's the younger generation, in particular, especially even the way that people like myself and conservative media will talk about the young generation, like, oh, all is lost. It's a lost cause, but of course that's not the case. And right. I certainly hope it isn't, because I have 6 of my own in the next generation also.
Yeah. No, I don't think that it is completely, but we feel the same way. And we often talk about that on our own content where it's just like, what is going on with this generation? But then we have our daughter, our oldest daughter is 18, and now she's getting into the same stuff that we're getting into. And we didn't actually want that for her because we've experienced a lot of the backlash and things that you get. So how do you feel about your children watching you do this? Do you think any of them will follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I struggle with the same thing. 'Cause sometimes in particular, my older son, well, he's interesting because he has two. If you ask him what he wants to do for a living, he's 11 years old. If you ask him what he wants to do when he grows up, he has two answers. One answer is that he wants to go out and live in the woods, like Daniel Boone, as a pioneer. He doesn't want any electricity. He wants to build his own house. He doesn't want anything. He doesn't want a driver's license. So he'll say that. But then if you catch him on another day, he'll say that he wants to do what I do. And I try to tell him that it's hard to do both. You can't. It's hard to be a media figure and also live without electricity.
Yeah.
So I kind of hope that he'll go the Daniel Boone route. I think that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, in particular, getting into the whatever it is, the content creation game. I can't say that there's no value in it. Obviously, it's what I do for a living. It's what you guys do. So I certainly hope there's value in it. But there are a lot of bad reasons a person can chase that goal. And I think the reason why it's not good for most people is because they're chasing it for the wrong reasons. And they want attention. They want affirmation, approval. They get addicted to you put out a video or something and you get a bunch of positive comments and you just get kind of like addicted to that. The money, all those kinds of things. I think most of the people who get into this, that's what drives them. And if that's what drives you, then first of all, you're probably not going to achieve much because there has to be something deeper. There has to be a deeper reason why you're doing this. And if there isn't, then that's kind of obvious to the audience and you're not interesting. You're not an interesting person to listen to. So you probably won't achieve your goal if that's what drives you. But even if you do achieve it, you're not going to be happy because what you find is that getting attention can be nice. It also can be its own challenge.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get too much of it and you get the wrong kind. And if you're lucky enough to have financial success doing this, then that's also great. But if that's all it is, you're going to be unhappy. There has to be something else that drives you, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of kicks along the way for sure.
More recently, you just released a feature film called Am I Racist? Can you give our audience just a brief synopsis about what that's about?
Sure. So Am I Racist is my journey to confront my white privilege, my whiteness. My journey to become what I end up becoming in the film is a DEI consultant, a DEI expert of my own. And of course, this is a satirical journey. People have compared it to, said it's a conservative Borat, which I'm not going to deny there are some comparisons, and I'm not insulted by the comparisons at all.
Except for the swimsuit.
Yeah, right. Well, I said there's some, but not all. We don't have the swimsuit, Borat, and that film. If you saw it, there's also a scene where he runs completely naked through a hotel. Mm-hmm. Nothing like that happens in this movie, so we don't do that. But similar, just in adopting, sort of portraying a character to try to bring things out of people that they otherwise wouldn't reveal, and that's what we do in this film. But one of the other, not to get sidetracked on the Borat thing, but one of the other distinctions between what we're doing in this film and what Borat does that I think is really important is that, Sacha Baron Cohen, very funny, but his, not just Borat, a lot of his films and things that he's done have mostly been with the intention of exposing embarrassing, normal, everyday Americans. And the first Borat film in particular was, if there was a message in it, the message was supposed to be something like, look at these friendly seeming people in the Midwest and the South, but underneath all that, they're all a bunch of bigots. That was kind of the message. We're doing something kind of the opposite of that, in that we are trying to expose and embarrass the expert class, people with PhDs that teach at colleges, the people that sell millions of dollars worth of books. We want to take their own ideas and turn them against them and expose them. So this is, I like to think, much more of a punching up scenario than what you normally find with this kind of entertainment.
Yeah, it really is hilarious. We got to watch it right before the backstage event. We watched it with our family, and then we watched it again just a couple days ago. And I would encourage anyone that's seen it to go see it again, and then maybe go see it again, because it gets funnier every time. There's little things that you don't catch on to, like the ice cream cone. It was my 14-year-old that was like, look at his ice cream. And like little things like that you catch when you see it again and again and again. So it's so funny. You guys put so much detail and thought into it. It's funny, but also not funny, because you realize these are real people and these are real grifts, and the people that pay to just be beat up on, it's kind of sad that people are willing to do that to themselves.
Yeah, it's very sad. And you're right that the film is funny. It's supposed to be funny, and I think mocking things that are fundamentally absurd is the correct response. But underneath all of that, it's also sad and disturbing, because these are real people are getting caught up in this, and
Right.
we try to bring that out in the film. I think that's and I'm glad to hear that it rewards a rewatch, because of course I
For sure.
very much encourage people to go buy tickets again and watch it again. Watch as many times as you possibly
Go
can
see
stomach.
it again and again. Bring
Right.
your friends.
But I actually think the same thing. I've seen it, as you can imagine, many times, mostly through the course of editing it, but even after that, I've probably seen the movie. The movie as it currently stands, I've seen that or a version very close to it, probably, 10 times or more. And I also think that even for me, as someone who was in the room, when I watch it again, I appreciate different aspects of it. But the thing that I often hear from people, now that it's been out for a few weeks, the thing that people seem to focus in on much more the second time is really thinking about where the movie ends up, not the final scene, but the climax of the movie, which is not actually Robin DiAngelo. And I think on first watch, at least from what I can tell anecdotally, first watch, Robin DiAngelo paying reparations. Spoiler alert.
She definitely stands out.
Right. That's
Yes.
the thing most people talk about. When I talk to people who've seen it a second time, they tend to now be more interested in what happens right after that, and that's the diversity workshop that I run myself. And I think the most important moment in the entire film is where that workshop ends. First with me berating my poor Uncle Frank for his racist joke that he told all those years ago. But then in particular, when so many people in the class join in
Yeah.
and kind of join in the pitchfork mob against Uncle Frank. So to me, if I were to think about like what's the most important part of the whole movie, what's the most important scene, what's the scene that kind of like has the message of the movie contained in it? It's that scene.
I would completely agree with you. And that was my takeaway in viewing the film, especially with the spoiler alert, the self-flagellation portion of it. And the fact that, there was kind of this mob mentality that took over to where if it was acceptable to verbally berate Uncle Frank, it seemed like
Nobody.
there were no
spoke up.
boundaries. People were willing to just go along with this insanity.
Yeah, exactly. It shows a lot of things. I think it shows how suggestible a lot of people are.
Yes.
How vulnerable to manipulation they are, and unfortunately how easy it is to manipulate people. Because when you think about it, what we're doing in that scene right there with Uncle Frank, it's first of all ridiculous. It's the kind of thing that when we conceived of this idea in the workshop, we thought that many people sitting in the class, and we did 3 of these classes, we thought that a lot of people would just not buy it, that at this point they'd understand that, okay, this can't be real. Like there's no way this is actually happening. This has to be some kind of joke. Because it's so ridiculous. But then also if you take it seriously, it's just, it's depraved. It's a horrific thing to do. And so we thought that when we got to that point of the workshop, almost everybody would get up and leave, and they would leave either because they're thinking this is some kind of prank, or because they take it seriously and they don't want to be a part of this because it's evil. Right. I did not actually expect that anybody would join the way that they did, and again, I think it shows that when you're standing there in a position of authority, even though, and in the class I'm a position of authority, even though I have no real authority, I have a DEI certificate that means nothing, right? There's no reason why anybody should be deferring to me at all. I'm just a guy that happens to be standing in front of people sitting at a desk. Mm-hmm. But that's enough for some people. Just the fact that I'm standing and they're sitting and they're looking at me means that they think they have to follow my lead. And then when you add into that that we're deliberately playing off of, in a really cartoonish way, I thought, playing off this racial kind of guilt and resentment. And so when you have those two things combined, you have someone in a position of unearned authority most of the time, and then you have the racial guilt and hangups that people have. When those things combine together, what we discovered is that people are willing to go along with just about anything. And I guess it shouldn't surprise me, because after all, it was only 4 years ago that this kind of mentality drove people to burn down whole city blocks. Yeah. So yelling at Uncle Frank by comparison is kind of small potatoes, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's just a little upsetting to see how easy it is to hijack and override somebody's common sense, seemingly. And these are real world applications. I mean, you do have similar types of workshops or trainings that happen across corporate America. I worked for a police department at one point in time, and I can actually recall seeing visual graphics like the one that you used in the film. Maybe not to the same comedic extent, but very similar in the way everything was set up. Yeah. So it was very disturbing to see. Was your response to that situation genuine, to where you became almost
that's what I was
frustrated and flabbergasted and gave up?
When you finally called the workshop and then you went on the news afterwards and you were talking to that one woman that was really trying to keep the conversation going.
She was great.
I felt so bad for her in a way. I was like, oh, look at her try. But you looked genuinely upset. Were you, or was that acting?
I mean, that was acting for the movie, because we knew that we wanted to do that. We also knew that we wanted the workshop had to be the as they say, the all is lost moment in filmmaking, and which I picked up our director Justin Folk, who's done both What Is a Woman and Am I Racist? He is a film director, so he understands things like story structure, which I didn't know going into the first movie. I knew nothing about any of that, and actually, I was very resistant to in What Is a Woman when we were making it. I was very resistant initially to putting any story structure on it, any kind of little scripted scene, anything at all that he was saying, well, we need this because we're telling a story, and this is where this part of the story is supposed to happen. And at first I was resistant to that, but over time I came to see that, this is filmmaking. We're not doing a podcast. So anyway, in the movie, as you get into the third act, which is what that kind of Robert DeAngelo in the workshop, the third act, you get close to your conclusion. That's when you have your all is lost moment, where the protagonist in the film thinks that everything is ruined and what am I going to do? And you always need that moment. And even in a documentary, if you're trying to tell a story within the context of a documentary, you need it. So we knew that we wanted the workshop to precipitate that. Now, I thought that what would precipitate the all is lost moment is that everybody would walk out of the workshop because it'd be so ridiculous. Right. And that would make me realize that, oh my gosh, I've gone too far. So what took me off guard is that we still had the all is lost moment, but it wasn't because they left, it's because they didn't leave.
Yeah.
So I was genuinely taken aback and rattled by that. Of course, you have to, portray it a certain way on camera just for the sake of the story. But when we finished filming that last, workshop, it took a minute. It was like one of those things we had to take a minute to process it. It was actually it was like kind of upsetting.
Disturbing.
And then you've got to kind of deal with it yourself, because it's one thing if I had just seen that happen. Mm-hmm. But I was involved in it and actually caused it to happen. And so you feel a little morally conflicted about that. But at the same time, this is what we're trying to expose for the film. So
Right. It's so important. So it brings so much negative attention on you. I mean, I think that the negativity is louder than the positivity. It's something that we're learning is the negative voices, even though there's less of them, they're so loud.
Yeah.
But we posted a photo with you. My daughter and I took a quick selfie with you backstage, and I posted it on Instagram. And it was funny how much it didn't bring as much anger as Ben Shapiro's, but you were a close second.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but we love it. We welcome it. It's my daughter. She's very much like, bring it on. Like, she just doesn't care. Americans are tired and frustrated by a stalling economy, inflation, endless wars, and the relentless assault on our values. Thankfully, there's companies like Patriot Mobile that still believe in America and our Constitution.
Yeah, we're proud to partner with Patriot Mobile because they're on the front lines fighting for the First and Second Amendments, the sanctity of life, and our military and first responder heroes.
So take a stand and put America first by switching to Patriot Mobile today. You'll get the same nationwide coverage as the big providers because Patriot Mobile operates across all 3 major networks. Plus, they back their service with a coverage guarantee.
Patriot Mobile's 100% US-based customer service team will find the best plan for your needs. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade.
Go to patriotmobile.com/NWOS or call 972-PATRIOT. Right now, get a free month when you use our offer code NWOS.
Don't get fooled by other providers pretending to share your values or have your same coverage. They don't, and they can't. Join us. Switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/NWOS or call 972-PATRIOT for your free month of service today.
Which makes us worry a little bit as parents because we can no longer control her now that she's an adult.
Yeah.
And but I mean, she's good. She's standing up for what's good and righteous, as are you. Does that ever affect family life? Does she ever like scale it back, Matt? Or does it ever get to the point where you feel like you need to scale it back, or are you here for it?
It certainly affects our family. My wife never tells me to scale it back because she's in this thing too and believes in what I'm doing, what we're doing, because I couldn't do it without her. So she's very much my partner in crime on this. But yeah, of course it affects the family. I mean, I can't deny that. And that's something that, of course, you wrestle with because I don't want, obviously I don't want anything to happen to my family. At the same time, when people are making threats and they're doing all that, we don't want that to work. I don't want to give these people what they want and then say, okay, well, you're threatening me, so I'm going to shut up. That can't happen either. So that's the balance. And what balancing it has meant is really just going to whatever lengths are necessary to keep my family safe. So we've had to adjust our lives pretty significantly for that. But that's what's necessary to do. And it's a lesson to my kids also that they're for most of their lives up until now, they've been only vaguely aware of what I even do for a living. For a long time when they were younger, they thought that, especially before I moved to Nashville and I was podcasting out of my car for a while. And then I would go to a coffee shop to write for most of the day. And so my kids for a long time thought that I was a barista. They thought that I worked at a coffee shop. And in recent years, especially the older kids, they've started to understand a little bit more, especially if I'm out, go out in public and people stop me. 99.9% of the time, these are positive interactions, which is nice, but they obviously realize that I'm not working at Starbucks. And as they've kind of become introduced to that and also introduced to some of the negative aspects of being in this position, it has been an opportunity to teach them that, if you say things that are true, if you stand for truth in this world, not everyone's going to like it. Mm-hmm. My kids have been there, unfortunately, on a couple of occasions with some negative interactions with the public. Nothing physical, nothing that got aggressive, nothing where I felt physically threatened at any time, but just one or two occasions where somebody was not a fan and communicated that to me when my kids are around, which I would. It is upsetting because I don't want my kids to have to experience that. But on those occasions, it's another opportunity to talk to them. And there's the first time it happened, we were driving home after somebody came up and they were just kind of nasty, and it was just brief, interaction, and he went away. I told him to go away, and he did. But that was the first time my kids realized that, oh, there are people who don't like dad in the world. And so my oldest son, was especially upset about that. I think because from his perspective, I'm dad, and he's still young enough where he thinks of dad as a superhero, which is, I know that won't last forever, but I'm milking that for all it's worth right now.
Yeah, for sure.
So from his perspective, it's like, well, how could anyone not like dad? I don't understand that. And so he was really wrestling with that. But it was a chance to talk to him and say that, this is what happens if you stand for something, and that's not a reason to stop standing for it.
For sure.
Right.
It's kind of sad that in today's day and age, to speak truth and acknowledge very factual, objective truth seems to be chalked up as being an act of bravery for whatever reason. I was very struck by a story that you told during the backstage of the Ryman event about your mother, I believe, being outside of an abortion clinic near your high school.
Yeah. Would
you mind just briefly retelling that story and what impact it had upon you at a younger age during your formative years?
Yeah, my mom has been involved in pro-life work since I was, I don't know how young, but practically my whole life.
God bless her.
Yeah. And at some point, I think when I was maybe in middle school age-ish, she started going to abortion clinics to pray outside of the abortion clinics, which is what most pro-lifers who go to abortion clinics, that's what they do. They don't, despite what the media might tell you, they're not sitting there screaming invective. I've actually never seen that. I'm sure it's happened, but vast majority of people who do this, they are praying and or trying to minister to the women by just providing them information. And so she started doing that sometime when I was, I don't know, probably 10 or 11. And our high school was right next to a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, so that the abortion clinic was practically in the parking lot. Not literally, but it was very, very close. And I think we all know strategically located. It's not a coincidence that it was there. And so when my mom started showing up with a small group of pro-lifers to the abortion clinic, this was on Saturday mornings, so school wasn't in session, but this is Saturday mornings when you had sports, whether it's football in the fall and soccer or whatever. And so I started to get worried that my friends who go to the school on Saturday mornings for whatever sport, that they would notice and then eventually my sisters end up joining too. They would notice my family outside of the abortion clinic, and I'd look weird, and they'd start asking me questions, and I was embarrassed about it. And then eventually that did happen. I had a couple of friends that noticed my mom, and I think I had a couple sisters outside of the clinic one morning. And the next Monday at school, they were asking me about it, and they were kind of, making fun of me. Like they were reacting in the way that I was worried that they would. And I don't remember exactly what I said to them, but I probably tried to, I don't think this was a Peter denying Christ moment where I said, I don't know those people. I don't think I said that, but I certainly didn't stand firm and say, well, you know what, they're doing the right thing. And I didn't do that at the time. So I related this to my mom later that day, and she said, why would you be embarrassed that your family is standing up against the murder of children? Isn't it more embarrassing that other people aren't? Shouldn't the people who aren't there be the ones who are embarrassed? And it was kind of a simple message, but it was very clarifying for me. And that's one of the things that, even from a young age, kind of inspired me to start being a lot more open with my value systems and my beliefs. And here I am now.
Yeah, and these are probably conversations that you'll have with your own children. I know it's conversations we've had with ours as they've gotten older. Do you guys homeschool?
We do, yeah.
That's what I thought, yeah. We've homeschooled the whole time. I used to be a public school teacher, and then as soon as I had my precious daughter, I thought, I can't put her in the system. And so I quit, and we took to the internet, and which is weird because he was a police officer for 14 years, which is the opposite of putting your family on the internet. And we've run a vlog for the last 5 years, building a house in the middle of nowhere, like your son wants to do, Daniel Boone style.
It's possible.
The mountains of North Idaho.
That's
you
awesome.
can be a content creator in the middle of nowhere, so there's hope for him.
True. That's a good point.
Yeah, especially podcasting, except for then you end up traveling all around. So this is actually our first time ever away from our children.
Wow.
So Matt, you're a rock star because you're the reason that we have gone away from our children for the very first time. We've always traveled as a family, and we're like, we got to go. We got to do this one. But it's become so important to show our children. With our safe vlog, we've kind of lit it on fire. We've had different managers of big creators calling us like, why are you lighting your channel on fire? What are you doing? And it's like, we're finally sick of it. And we're standing up for truth. And then hearing your story at the Ryman, it's like, yeah, we need to do that same thing for our children. We need to show them it is more important to stand up for what's good. It's more important to stand up for God than it is to get views and we love you. You're so used to getting thousands of we love yous. You guys are great. And now we're getting, what is wrong with you? We hate you. After 5 years, we feel deceived, unsubscribing. Like we've kind of had this whole thing. So it's been are we doing the right thing? But in talking to people like you and with our kids seeing people like you who are standing up no matter what, it empowers people and it empowers young people to know that it's so important that good speaks up.
Yeah. And it can be pretty jarring. I know even now, you're always going to get those comments from people that say, I've been following you for 80 years and now I'm done with you because of whatever you just said. And so you're always going to get that no matter what. I still get it. Even now, it's like every time you hear that, it is a little bit startling because they think, well, wait a second, did I really say something that's out there that someone who's been with me this whole time is turning their back? But then you realize that, number one, most of the people who say that kind of thing, it's not true. They have not been. Because really, if they've been with you and they've been following you and they've been, and you've been sharing your life with them and your views and they've been fans the whole time, then they do know, they don't know you personally, but they do know you. And so now if they're saying, well, because you expressed this viewpoint I disagree with, then really you're a terrible person. Well, that's like, you obviously didn't. You wouldn't be saying that if you'd really been following this whole time, because you should know what I'm about. So that's the first thing. Most of those people, they just say that because they know it gets to you. But to the extent that it's true for anybody, the good news is that for every one person who walks out like that, there's 5 others who notice that, who see that you're willing to lose audience for the sake of what you believe, and they notice that, and that means a lot to them. And so for every one who leaves, I think ultimately 5 you probably gain. Because the one thing people are looking for the most, I think, especially when it comes to, content creators, which I hate the
As do we.
term, right? But I think one of the thing that the audience is hungering for the most is truth, yes, but authenticity.
Yes.
Because everything is so fake, and now you add in AI. It's just like you're just surrounded by fakeness to varying degrees, phoniness. And so when they see something authentic, they say, well, this is a real person who's being honest about who they are and what they believe. And I think people are starving for that, so they're very drawn to it ultimately.
We want to take a quick moment to thank Hillsdale for sponsoring today's episode. So we are just getting started with our new homeschool year, which is always exciting because after 13 years of homeschooling, we have really figured out what works and what doesn't work for our family. And we have been so blessed to have the freedom to actually teach our children about history, economics, and the great works of literature, and really dive into different subjects together as a family. But here's the thing, you don't actually have to be a homeschool family or a student to learn something new and inspiring, because Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses in the most important and enduring subjects. You can learn about the works of one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, stories from the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, plus so much more. And Hillsdale online courses are 100% free. and self-paced, so you can start them wherever and whenever is convenient for you. We are starting off our school year with American heritage from colonial settlement to the current day. I highly recommend you check this one out because in this 10-lecture course, you will examine how America's founders had a unique opportunity to start government anew based on principles of equality and consent, and how the major challenges of the founders centered around these principles. It truly is such a fascinating and in-depth study into our nation's history, and we have found all of their courses to be so engaging and very well done. I seriously could not believe that this was a free resource when I first discovered them. To check out Hillsdale online courses for yourself, just go to hillsdale.edu/NWOS. That is hillsdale.edu/NWOS. Yeah.
Agreed.
I think so too. Yeah, it's been so fun to watch you just not care, because it does cause, and I mean, maybe you do care, but it seems like
I was just going to say, is that a true statement? Do you care?
Yeah, I do care. I wish I could. Well, I think if you don't care at all what other people think, then that makes you a sociopath, basically, which I'm accused of being sometimes, but I'm actually not.
Jeremy Boring told our son you were.
Yeah,
He's like, you know what Jeremy Boring?
He likes to say that. He likes to say it's all in love, I hope. But it is, as a human being, it's natural to, you don't want people to hate you.
Yeah.
And that's natural to not want that. And I think if you start to like take joy in being hated, then that's its own kind of narcissism, and it's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So I think I actually do care, but I have other things that I prioritize above that. And so I always try to keep that in mind. And I take confidence in knowing the only time, I'll tell you, if I say something and there's a big outrage about it, which happens all the time, I never worry about it as long as I'm quite sure that what I said was true. The only time that I would be worried about it is if I start to question, like, well, was I wrong about that? And if I start to question that, if I'm not sure about the truth of what I said, well, then that can actually get in my head. But that's why it helps to stick with the basic truth of things, mm-hmm. and to never say anything you don't believe, which I never do. That's the other thing too. I mean, if you're sustaining a huge backlash for some position you took that you don't even believe in, well, I have to imagine that's pretty torturous too. But I can say that I never say anything I don't believe in. So
yeah. Well, your daily show is fantastic. Your movies are amazing. Your comedy and your acting, like in Lady Ballers, is so funny. We didn't realize you were so funny after watching you and reading you for all these years. We didn't realize, like, we knew you were funny, but we didn't realize you were that funny. Like, Lady Ballers was hilarious, which we also let our children watch that. It was our 9-year-old recognized the gal from it. She's like, backstage at that thing, he was like, that's the girl that licks people. And he went and said hi to her, and she's like, you let your kids watch Lady Ballers? And we're
parenting.
Like, we didn't know exactly what it was about. We just put it on. But
it's a little,
it was fun.
It's a bit dicey here and there, but yeah,
it was fine. Yeah. We have so many conversations with our kids that it doesn't matter, but it was so funny. And so where do you go from here? I mean, I really hope you continue making films, but you've tackled 2 really large issues. Yeah. I was kind of thinking, what's the next one? What can we tackle next?
I've thought about that. Nothing that I can divulge without having to kill you, of course. So I've thought about it. Definitely, I want to keep making movies. And once you, at least for me, once I had the experience of making a piece of content like that, which is long form, you take months and months to work on it. It's not like the daily show I do. It's kind of, I spend a lot of time working on it, but it's work on it for 8 or 9 hours, and then I do the show, and then on to the next one. So getting outside of that daily grind, working on something for a sustained period of time, putting a lot of thought into it, and then putting it out into the world, and it has an impact that lasts for longer than 10 seconds, which is kind of what happens in the daily political commentary space. Experiencing that, it's like, yeah, I want to keep doing that. because there's a real, film has a real power to it, and I also really enjoy doing it. There are other, I've written books too. I guess I've written 3 books plus a children's book. The children's book I enjoyed writing because it took very little effort.
You whipped that out really quickly.
Yeah. The longer books, even though my books are not that long, probably 250 pages. Not long by say Jordan Peterson standards or something, but those I find torturous to do. Actually, very difficult to write a book. And then when you put it out into the world, it's really hard to make an impact with a book, unfortunately, because most people don't read anymore. But movies have sort of replaced books, for better or worse. They've kind of replaced books. And so if you can make a movie and get it in front of an audience, you can really make a big impact, I've found. So I certainly plan to keep on doing it.
How do you feel about drawing comparisons to basically becoming the more conservative Michael Moore? Have you heard that narrative that's been floated around out there?
Yeah.
The conservative Michael Moore. Yeah. Period.
Yeah, I have heard that. I'm flattered by it. Michael Moore is a brilliant filmmaker, or at least he was. He had a run from, I guess it was 89 or 90 to about 2004 or 5. Between Roger and Me was his first documentary, and then Fahrenheit 9/11, which is the most successful documentary of all time. Made like $110 million at the box office, which is insane for a documentary to make that kind of money. And then he had Bowling for Columbine in between there. And I think it's one of the most impressive runs for a filmmaker in any genre probably ever. And all 3 of those movies, I don't really agree with, in particular Bowling for Columbine, which is of course his gun control movie. Totally disagree with the premise, but it's a good film. Like if I can sit and watch your crazy left-wing documentary and somehow enjoy it, then there must be something artistically that you've achieved there. I think in recent years he has maybe seems to have lost his touch a bit artistically, it seems. But yeah, so I take that as a high compliment if anybody says that.
Very fair. You don't need Melissa and I to tell you that life is precious and everything can change in an instant. That's why we're so passionate about keeping an emergency food supply kit from My Patriot Supply in our home.
My Patriot Supply has everything our family could need during a crisis. With over 2,000 calories per day, there is enough to go around during times of social unrest, natural disasters, another pandemic, or God forbid, an attack on our homeland. And the food lasts for 25 years, and it's ready whenever and wherever disaster strikes.
Yeah, it was just a few years ago, we all saw a mass panic and just how quickly the grocery store can empty. So we want to highly encourage you not to take your family's safety for granted with the help of My Patriot Supply.
Right now, you can get $50 off the same 4-week emergency food kit that we keep in our very own home. And at a minimum, you should have 1 kit for every member of the household. And speaking of being prepared, Christmas is just around the corner, and these food pails make a really cool and unique gift that everyone's going to love.
Just go to preparewithnwos.com and save $50 right now on your 4-week emergency food kit. My Patriot Supply will send it over as fast as humanly possible. Trust us, we know our order showed up in just 1 day and it shipped for free. Get your 4-week emergency food kit now at preparewithnwos.com. That's preparewithnwos.com.
We're excited to see the next film because these 2 have been fantastic. I hope that this stays in theaters and it keeps going because it's so important that people see it. And hopefully being funny will drive some people to give it a chance. So I think you've just really nailed these films. The humor can bring anyone in, but the message is so important and it has to get out there. And you can't just be preaching to the choir all the time. And so often that's how daily commentary goes, but with films. Yeah,
I agree. And that's why we wanted to put the comedy, especially in this one. The first movie has funny moments, I think. It's not, I wouldn't classify it as a comedy.
Yeah.
And then for the second half of the film is very much not funny and not intended to be for What Is a Woman. With this one, we wanted it to try to make it funny the whole way through because, yeah, you're right that comedy is, it's kind of a universal language, which maybe sounds strange because comedy is also very subjective, but it's universal in the sense that, if somebody finds something funny, they just even if they don't agree with the message, you can't help but laugh at it. The left used to be very good at this kind of at wielding comedy.
Yeah.
So that somebody like me would watch and I kind of know the point you're making and I don't agree with it, but I have to laugh because you're funny. What can I do? They are not as good at that anymore at all. I think they've kind of abandoned comedy.
They've become so sterile, and they don't want to offend anything that's not funny anymore. It's like watching Family Guy now. You're like,
yeah,
where's all the funny parts?
Yeah, they don't want to offend anybody. They in some cases they're so angry now because of Trump and because of whatever else they're mad about that there's no comedy that can peek through. You know, anger is not really a good emotional starting point for comedy.
Propaganda's not funny,
right? You know, there are comedians that their whole act is to yell and stuff, and that can be kind of funny. But if you're actually like seething with rage, then you can't be funny, I don't think. So I think they've abandoned the playing field of comedy, and it leaves that open for someone to come in. And I hope that more conservatives do. Obviously, we're not the only ones. I mean, the Babylon Bee have a lot of great stuff. There are some stand-up comedians. I think the best stand-up comedians in the country right now are probably don't identify as conservative, but are not liberal, or maybe right of center.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite stand-up?
I don't know if I don't have one exact favorite, but kind of this new generation of Shane Gillis is hilarious. Andrew Schultz is hysterical.
Would you ever do Kill Tony? You familiar with Kill Tony?
Yeah, I would.
That would be really good.
Call me up, guys.
Yeah, we watched the Jordan Peterson one. We're like, they should get that.
All those guys are really funny. Louis C.K. is not really the new generation, but is a comedic genius. And I know he got canceled for his issues, but still, like I said, funny is funny, and the guy is a comedic genius. So there are people, but even him, he certainly would probably not identify as conservative, but he's not. He doesn't strike me as a leftist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So even now, I think all the good comedy is. It may not be coming from the fringe, far crazy right, like I supposedly occupy, but it's kind of in the right wing space. I think all of the good comedy now.
Yeah, it's nice to see that, because we were just saying all the good food is in the liberal cities. Like, you got to go to Portland, Seattle, LA to get good food, and the good music and the good movies. And it's like, why did they do all the good art stuff? Like, because sometimes you watch Christian films and you're like, it's like so cheesy. And why don't they make good films like that? So we so appreciate what the Daily Wire is doing with things like Lady Ballers, because we just watched The Western too, which we didn't realize that was as gritty as it is either. But it's so nice to see the other side, if you will, making more relatable, gritty, innuendo-laced films, because everybody's not sterile on the right. And so it's like, we want good movies and good comedies and all that stuff too.
Yeah. And I think part of it is I've thought about this a lot, that why haven't conservatives produced good art? Historically, that hasn't been the case, but in the last for my whole life, it has been. And Christian films, I feel the same way about. Not all of them, but well, probably pretty much all of them actually. For me.
Angel Studio's done some good ones.
Yeah, but even them, they're you take Sound of Freedom or something, enormously successful film. I wouldn't call it a Christian film. It's a film made by Christians, but I wouldn't call it a Christian film. That's the difference. So, in my lifetime, probably all of our lifetimes, conservatives have not been very good at art, and I've tried to. I think many people have thought about that, and why is that the case? And I don't have the whole answer. I think that part of it is that good art, especially comedy, but not just, tends to be kind of anti-establishment. It tends to be subversive in some way.
Maybe that's why the pendulum's swinging.
Right. Or at least that's the kind of energy that drives good art, is when you're critical of institutional power structures, and there's like certain frustration that comes from and conservatives now, it's like trying to break into these industries alone. It's really frustrating and difficult, and so you have to be more creative and innovative and figuring out ways to just be noticed. And I think all of that can just create it drives good art. But on the left, their problem now is that they own all the institutions. They are the establishment now, so they can't really do anything that's anti-establishment. they have no artistic frustration anymore because they can just, you make something, you have all the channels available to you, you can distribute it on. The world's your oyster, and that's one of the consequences of wearing the crown, I suppose, is that you're no longer the outsider who has that kind of insurgent energy.
It's funny how that's changed. Now it's becoming trendy for young teenagers, for young boys in particular, to be conservative. It's like, ooh, you're conservative. Like a Trump hat's like trendy now, which is funny, at least in our area. But again, we live in Idaho. But maybe it's not so trendy in Seattle. But it's funny how that's becoming, it's like, oh, these are the fringe kids. These are the kids that are based is the new thing. And everyone wants to be based now, which I'm kind of loving seeing this happen. I'm loving that it's gone so crazy and so far, which Am I Racist and What Does a Woman both point out. It's gone so far that I think young people are starting to say, this is nuts. Like,
Yeah.
we're not going to do this. This is not what we want to sign up for, and this isn't how we want to raise our families. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah,
Voices like yours are so important.
And that it was inevitable that the pendulum would swing that way, because once, on the left, I guess it's like once you start hearing, if you're the side that you're saying things that would be echoed by the HR rep at a bank, when that's your ideological position, it's not cool anymore. There's just no way for that to be cool. And so the left's positions, that it's all coming now from, and your teachers are saying it and everything, which means, again, that you've won, that you utterly dominate the culture, but it does mean that it's not cool. It's not cool anymore. It's not cool to sound like an HR rep or to sound like your social studies teacher. And once that transition happens, then it's sort of inevitable that you would have a new generation of kids, especially boys, who look at that and say, I don't want to, that's not cool. I don't want to, because boys have a risk-taking kind of rebellious instinct, even more than girls, I think. And so they're they want to take the position that's a little bit sort of dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's conservatism now, which, so we should take advantage of that, I suppose.
And they get to be boys, and they get to grow up and be men under that. And I think boys crave that. I mean, we have boys and girls, and they're very different from the time that they are born. They are different. Yeah. And our boys definitely crave being manly, and to be told that that's bad or that's toxic, it really enrages our 14-year-old. Like, he just hates all of that, and it makes him just want to be all man. And so I think that's a lot of boys. It's in them to want to be men and be providers and be protectors. So to be told that that's bad just makes them want to do it more.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I know we need to get you out of here. We so appreciate your time. And like I said, we've been longtime fans and followers of yours. So thank you for all you do. Continued success. Congratulations on everything that's happened for you. And hopefully we can do this again at some point.
I appreciate it. Thanks thanks for being here. Or
Thanks, man.
I guess that you're here. I'm here anyway.
Yeah. Well, yes. We came from Idaho, and we're rushing back because we left an 18-year-old in charge. And the second our plane took off, a epic lightning storm hit our property. Well, all of the panhandle. So there's no power from Washington State through Montana. And so, I mean, yes, our kids live rustically, but now they are literally hand pumping water like Jack and Jill to pour down toilets to get them to flush. And we're like, oh no.
Good times.
Get the full pioneer experience.
Yeah, they lived it for a couple of years while we were building our house, but now they're having to go back to the hand pump water. And
well, all the more then. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
no,
Thanks, Matt.
It's been awesome.
Living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond